Paper was like gold in medieval times.
Oh, not tobacco. Sugar.
That everything we thought we knew about the world might turn out to be completely wrong.
This is the Valley, a vanished world from a forgotten time. Here on the Welsh borders, a farm is being run by 5 hand-picked experts, as it would have been nearly 400 years ago. Using only resources available in the year 1620, they are labouring for a full calendar year, turning the clock back to rediscover a way of life from an age gone by.
It's May now, it's our 9th month working on the farm. And 400 years ago, this was a key month for dairy production. So we'll be doing lots of milking and butter making. The ground's firming up a bit as the weather warms, so we can start moving timber. And I'll be getting on with the charcoal burning soon. But the one thing that's really got badly behind is getting the clearance on triangle fields so that we can get our pea crop in.
8 months ago, Triangle Field was waste ground. Reclaiming it for cultivation has been the team's biggest task to date. They've been working hard to remove the countless bracken and bramble roots. Now, Alex and Fons are finally on the home stretch.
We had a bit of a crisis meeting yesterday, myself and Fons. We had decided after we'd put all the muck on, there just wasn't really enough organic material on the field. We really wanted to beef up the soil. So what we decided to do was to go out into the fields and do some poo picking.
And this horse manure that we've put on this field, this is the sort of stuff that people kill for their roses. This is a replica forter, otherwise known as a breast plough, and I've been really looking forward to getting to grips with this thing. It's fairly heavy, fairly robust. Fons and I have given it a little bit of a try, but this is the first time we've tried it to this extent, so I'm not quite sure how it's going to work on the whole field, so quite anxious as to whether we can get a nice straight furrows.
May is a relatively quiet time in the agricultural calendar. So Stuart and expert charcoal burner Dr. Malcolm Stratford are going to try turning wood into charcoal, a valuable item in the 17th century.
What we've got is an open lattice, and we pack this with dry material, tinder, bits of twigs, bit of dry bark, little chippings, and we pack it down the middle. We then stack all our proper wood around it. Charcoal burning's probably been going on thousands of years, to be quite honest. In the 17th century, charcoal burning really powered the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution.
To turn wood into charcoal, rather than ash, means building a special wood stack around a central chimney. Getting the flue just right is vital.
Charcoal has a lot of advantages. It's a lighter weight material and it's virtually smoke-free, which means you can burn it in a house, for example in a brazier, without a chimney to take the smoke away. The other thing is it's a much purer product. It's basically just carbon, and therefore it can be used for industrial processes like smelting iron.
Go on then, Duchess.
With the calving season over, May is the month when dairy production really gets going. So Ruth and Chloe have the job of milking.
Good girl. Come on.
It's something that needs to be done morning and evening.
Good girl. Come on. Duchess is in full milk now. She had a calf about a month ago. And this is the most productive time of the year, really, for the dairy. We've got really good, rich milk coming for the butter and the cheese, cream. Stand still, sweetie. Stand still. Good girl. This is a 13-year-old cow, and not very often been milked. These udders are like leather. It's like milking her is like trying to squeeze a squash ball like you do for physio when you've got a shoulder injury or something. This is
It's hard work. It really is hard work. I'm getting hands like nutcrackers.
The section of field being prepared for peas is relatively small, which is just as well since breast ploughing is tricky work.
Now, this is really just a glorified spade. Although it's called a breast plough, I'm actually finding that I'm not needing to use my breast up here. And that, in fact, the soil here seems to be friable enough to be able to just push it in. But I have to say, I haven't completed the first furrow yet, and it's proving to be quite difficult.
Charcoal burning was a specialist craft. The professionals would travel from place to place to ply their trade.
The charcoal burners in the 17th century were almost a race apart, a bit like the Romany gypsies were, who almost spoke their own language, lived quietly in the woods, interacted only with themselves and almost nobody else.
It's curious that you find no surnames that would indicate charcoal burning as a profession, and you find no wills or inventories for charcoal burners. And it indicates in a bit of a way that they may well have been just that much more divorced from the whole normal system of life.
It may be slow and laborious work, but it's also highly skilled, requiring diligent attention.
There's a lovely account in one of the Icelandic sagas, Hrafnkell saga, I think, where there was, I believe, a man fell asleep while making charcoal. It all caught fire, and the 80 square miles of forest was burnt down.
Well, there's now only 3 small woods left in Iceland.
Most of the saga was about who should pay for the damage.
The chimney flue finished. Malcolm and Stuart can surround it with the wood they hope to turn into charcoal. In the 17th century, industry was on the rise, and so the need for charcoal was growing ever greater. Britain's woodlands were devastated to meet demand. Out at the stables, Ruth and Chloe are slowly getting to grips with milking by hand, like the milkmaids of the period.
Somebody who could specialise in the dairy could charge higher rates. If you had more than the one cow, it might often well be worth employing a dairy maid rather than just a general maid, because she could bring in her own value in wages by the quality of the cheese and the butter she was producing.
Oh, so steady, 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 steady.
She does not want to stand still this morning, does she?
No.
She's really jittery.
I'm starting to sweat just following her around. Not a bad yield.
Yeah,
it's not as good as I was expecting, but you know. We can live with it.
By lunchtime, Stuart and Malcolm's stack of wood is slowly disappearing beneath a layer of bracken and earth.
The whole purpose of which is to make sure when you burn it, the air doesn't get through. If you were to let the air in at any time when the charcoal's hot, before you know it, you've got an enormous bonfire, and if that happens, you get ash, and of course, no charcoal.
It's like putting an enormous fire blanket over the pile of burning wood. The earth is absolutely vital to the process. It controls the flow of oxygen.
Well, that looks fine to me. I can't see any green poking through. We'll just pat it down with a shovel in a minute, and that should be fine.
Mid-afternoon and the furrows in Triangle Field are shaping up. Alex's breast ploughing technique has picked up speed. Once the charcoal pile is complete, it just needs a bucket of embers to get it lit.
Here we go. Can you tip? A small stack of charcoal like this only takes a day to build. Tip it in, tip it in. The bigger stacks could involve up to 30 wagon loads of wood. Once they're stacked, all of them start in the same way. Caught fire already. Just to top it up a bit with a bit more hot charcoal. In we go. Ow, ow. Is that the lot?
With the chimney lit, period sources recommend it should be capped as quickly as possible with some wood and a large piece of turf. Then a close vigil needs to be kept while it slowly smoulders.
Spread it round. Try and pack it in a little bit, but not too tight at this stage.
Better than your average toupee.
Yeah. It is. No rush, no rush.
A new May morning. Time for Alex and Fons to get the last of the furrows in and start sowing their pea crop.
We're really chuffed that now it resembles a field of sorts, even though it's quite a small area. And the thing with the ridges as well, they've sat up really nicely.
Our dung has mixed really well with our earth, which is really important because these peas that I'm sowing, they're a very special variety of small pea. They've been dying out, and they're a variety that would have been used 400 years ago. And we've got probably over half the stock in the UK. So this is quite an important experiment.
At the back of the farmhouse, in the dairy, Ruth and Chloe can get to work on all the milk they've collected.
It's a wonderful time of year for cream and butter making at the moment. It takes quite a lot of cream to fill a churn to make a nice big batch. So you save up from the evening and the morning milking. Obviously, you can only keep it so long. Gervase Markham, for example, who wrote At the Time, recommends that you should never keep your cream in summer more than 3 days and in winter more than 6. That the last bit?
Nice. Fantastic. Actually got quite a lot of cream off that one.
With enough cream skimmed off, Ruth and Chloe can start the hard work of beating it in a butter churn.
I mean, ideally, this amount of cream should take about 20 minutes to turn into butter. But it can go on for hours if the temperature's wrong or there's something not quite perfect with the cream.
How's it going? Is it going?
It's beginning to thicken. I can feel it beginning to get a bit heavier.
Yeah, that's definitely starting to thicken, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? You can start to hear it. I feel it as well. It's starting to get a little bit sticky. Oh gosh, that's thickened up.
Here's a look.
Oh, you can see it, can't you? It's coming up the top.
Oh, look at that.
Ooh.
Lovely.
Down in the woods, it's difficult to know how successful the charcoal burning has been. There's only one way to tell for sure. Crack it open and see how much charcoal is inside.
Slowly. Oh, good, that's really brilliant stuff there. The fire has basically gone out and the heap's cooled down. There are a few bits that are still brown, not black, but this isn't wasted. All that would happen is a real charcoal burner would take these half-burnt bits and put them straight back into the next burn.
Oh, look at this bit. It's just beautiful, isn't it?
Very nice,
Yeah.
very soft.
These small domestic heaps are going to be much less efficient on the burn. The big commercial boys at the time would have been producing much more efficiently. They'd have had maybe 90% plus of good charcoal. Here, what do you reckon, 30, 40%, maybe even 50? 50,
yeah.
you reckon? Yeah, because there's quite a bit gone down between the sticks.
It's not bad at all. There's some good charcoal in the middle.
In the dairy, it sounds like the cream has changed texture.
It's beginning to turn, having gone really stiff and heavy. It's beginning to lighten up as the first of the separation starts to happen.
There we go. Can you hear that?
It's quite a different noise. Anyone doing the dairy 400 years ago could not be some fey little slip of a thing. You need muscles for something like this. And if you haven't got them when you start, you soon have.
Just a sec, sorry.
Still partially soaked in buttermilk, the butter comes out looking rather like scrambled eggs.
Our next process is squeezing the last of this buttermilk out from the butter. If we left it in, the butter would go rancid very, very quickly. But by taking it out, it becomes almost pure fat, and that way, of course, it'll keep much better.
I'll get the jug for the milk.
So we've got quite a nice amount of butter this time.
On a farm in the 17th century, buttermilk was either drunk, given to the pigs, or even given to the poor as a form of charity. At the bottom end of the farm, Fons and Alex can turn their attention to the final stage of sowing their pea crop, harrowing. Their work has uncovered some significant discoveries.
As archaeologists, they've got myself and Fons really excited. Now, this may look like a piece of rusty iron, but this is in fact a ploughshare from the 1940s.
This 1940s ploughshare indicates the field was cultivated during the Second World War. At a time when food was rationed, even the most marginal of lands was being used for farming.
In the 17th century, you've got very similar demands being made on the English and the Welsh landscapes, and areas like the field that we're turning over would have been pressed into service, simply because you've got a burgeoning population. Now, the second find is a harrow, and this we found just outside the gate in the orchard. This particular example is likely to date from the 19th century, when this farm was last in use. But in style and by design, it's very similar to those depicted in contemporary documents.
Ruth and Chloe are trying to master some wooden paddles known as butter hands. These will squeeze out the last of the buttermilk.
It's like kneading, really, like kneading bread, but you don't want to be doing it with your hands because people's hands are far too warm and you'd be melting the butter and spoiling it.
Once patted, the butter is ready for eating, but without refrigeration, most of it would have been salted to preserve it. The end of a long day, and Fons and Alex are doing well with their Victorian harrow.
This harrowing is working like a dream. It's knocking all the ridges over into the furrows and covering our peas, but it's allowing the oxygen to get in so that they can breathe and the water can get in.
It's enormously satisfying, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not too heavy, so one, we can pull it, and two, it doesn't compact the earth.
Wonderful.
It's half a field done in, how long? About 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
If that.
Let's run it down the bottom again then. Illustrations of the period actually depict horses pulling these harrows, but we had such a nightmare when we brought Blackthorn in here to do the muck spreading that we decided that we'd do it ourselves and use the both of us, and in fact it's really quite light and really easy, so I think we've saved ourselves a hell of a lot of time.
The charcoal burning has been a reasonable success.
Getting some really nice stuff coming out of here.
There should be enough to fill at least a couple of sacks.
The price of charcoal varied, but generally you're talking about £1 a sack for, which was about a day's wages at the time. Some charcoal burners, of course, had very unfavouring reputations, particularly for half-filling sacks with stones and earth, putting a bit of charcoal on the top, and then selling them off to the gullible public.
Another fresh May morning, and with their spring crop safely in the ground, Alex and Fons have decided to take it easy for the day and try a spot of fishing, 17th century style.
No, hopefully we should. Well, I'm hoping we'll catch something. I'm not confident, to be honest. But
it'd be nice to be able to get a couple of bites.
Yeah.
Even if we don't actually land the fish. I don't think our horse Blackthorn's going to be talking to me at the moment. Yesterday I pinched a load of hairs from her tail because to make the fishing lines we need horsehair.
Plaited or woven, the horsehair made for a good strong line. To go on the end of it, they've gathered some bits of wool and feathers to fashion some rustic flies.
I've been tasked with making the rods, and I've got one here which I was playing around with. It's very thin, but what I've done is I've spliced onto the end a piece of, I think this is hawthorn, onto the end here, onto the hazel. And the simple reason is by the time the hazel gets this thin, it's actually dangerously breakable. See, there, I've just broken it. but the idea is in splicing this onto here, you haven't got that flexibility, and that's as unlikely to break.
With much of their dairy work out of the way, Ruth and Chloe can also get on with a more relaxed task, making straw rope. Keith Paynes, the professional thatcher who worked on the valley's cowshed, has come to lend a hand. None of them have tried this before.
Life in the past without string and rope would have been virtually impossible. Every job you need to do involves some sort of string or rope to tie things. So being able to produce your own would be a major money-saving thing.
How's it feeding, Ruth?
Well, it's sort of coming.
Provided the straw rope's kept dry at all times, it can last an incredible amount of time. This piece here is 400 years old, and we found on a thatched cottage. Interestingly, there was no rafters or battens on this roof. There was just 3 horizontal purlings, and then the straw rope was woven up and down from top to bottom. And the decay and the break in this has only come about where there's been water ingress over the years, but the rest of it, where there's been no water ingress, is as strong as the day it was put there.
That is quite incredible, isn't it?
It is incredible. And to hold up probably a ton of thatch, all resting on just straw rope, is amazing.
Chloe's using a similar technique, feeding and twisting straw to make a basket.
Domestically, these baskets are enormously useful. You've got beehives, log baskets, laundry baskets, and they're so easy to make. They use materials from the farm, quick and simple.
To twist the straw into rope, Keith and Ruth are using a period tool known as a wimble.
This is a tool I've had for some considerable time, as in the woodworm. But it's, but we're hoping it'll actually make the job very easy for us. We're hoping.
We're hoping, yeah. Beginning to learn it, aren't we? The feel and the
idea of it.
In the farm's hall, Stuart is rustling up some period fare.
400 years ago, this was a curious time in culinary terms because certain things, particularly the dairy produce, was in full flood. So we've got masses of butter, cream, but in other areas like the garden, the material that we've planted this year is still only just starting to come through. So while we have radishes appearing, we're still reliant a little bit on the old leftover winter foods of parsnips. The main dish for today's meal is collop and eggs. Collops are basically just rashers of bacon, except when you haven't got a slicer, you're doing it with a knife, they tend to come out a bit more chunky, more like gammon ham. Now the bacon 400 years ago had to last without refrigeration, so the only way to do that was to make it a lot saltier than nowadays.
To make it palatable, the bacon needs soaking to remove some of the salt before cooking.
This
well,
is
we're
going
having
to
to
be
change a
marvellous.
shift, the other way round, because my hands are hurting.
There doesn't seem to be any evidence in this period of a specialist industry making straw rope or a cottage industry. I think it was just such a simple technique that people could just pick it up from the farm. Anybody from labourers, farmer's wife, anybody really could make it as and when they needed the actual rope to be made.
When I've twisted sort of threads to make tassels and cords and things, I've sort of just twisted it in my fingers. But this is much easier. Up!
Down on a nearby river, full of seasonally jumping salmon, Alex and Fons can try out their period fishing tackle. A local fisherman, Robin Coleman, is offering a few handy tips.
So in the saucers, there's 2 types of line, horsehair and silk. And we can't afford silk, so we would have used horsehair.
Yes. I mean, the object of the horsehair was because it was the only material that became almost invisible in the water.
Right. And I'm steadily getting the hang of casting and not catching Alex and taking his coat off him. But I don't think I'm going to catch anything.
Well, you don't know.
You never know.
It works. I mean, we've proved that we are able to get the fly in the water. We're relying entirely on the structure of this rod to cushion the impact of the fish.
Although fishing reels had started to be used in the period, Alex and Fons have gone for simplicity. If they do get a bite, they could try a technique recommended in period texts: throwing in the rod and letting the fish tire itself out.
Don't think I'll be catching much today.
Back to the drawing board.
Has it snapped?
Yeah, it's just snapped it.
Probably a notch in the splice that's too deep, or the willow that's too soft, perhaps.
What was up with it then?
Technique.
Don't be frightened to blame my tool spawns.
400 years ago, as it still is, May was a time when you had a lot of bank holidays or the equivalent thereof, big festivals. The big festival dish that we're going to do, which was very common at this time of year, is flauns, or as we think of them nowadays, cheesecakes. They even use the term sometimes then. It's very different from a modern cheesecake. It's done in a puff pastry case, not on a biscuit base. And instead of all those fruit toppings, which they'd never thought of, you've got rosewater as the flavouring agent. So here we go.
The main ingredients are a good dollop of fresh cheese, a splash of cream, some eggs, a handful of currants, some butter, and a luxury item of the period, brown powder sugar.
Now for the flavouring. This is the rosewater. Not too much of this because it actually tastes quite salty. And a little nutmeg just to spice it up.
Once beaten, the cheesecake mix needs to be poured into a pre-baked pastry case, ready for cooking in the farm's bread oven.
The Mayday festivities started with just after midnight. All the youths of the village would head out into the woods, collecting flowers and greenery to decorate the house with. Now, John Stowe, who is writing in the late Elizabethan period and is a miserable Puritan killjoy, claimed that of every 100 virgins that went out into the woods, scarce a third came back in the same condition.
Don't have the luck.
Still no catches down on the river, but for Fons and Alex, it's a well-deserved rest.
Do you think they would have been more skillful fishermen back then?
Successful fishermen years ago worked very hard for what they caught. However, there were a lot more fish then to catch. So the chances were greater of connecting with a fish, probably not so good as they are today of landing one.
Of actually landing it, right.
Yeah.
I've had one bite.
Have you?
Well, I've had something
nibble.
Do that.
Ah.
What do you think of the new improved rod then, Fons?
I think it's brilliant. I can cast the fly quite far out.
To fashion her basket, Chloe has been experimenting with various materials.
Halfway through, I switched to using nettle, which is very effective, but it takes a hell of a long time to strip the nettle down and you get stung to pieces. This is our new egg basket, because we've had several breakages using ceramic bowls every time people go and collect the eggs, and I thought this would be a bit more sensible.
Do you want to check the end?
It's a shame, we'd like to have caught something, but
you can't have everything.
The boys may have failed to bring home a giant salmon, but old-fashioned bacon and eggs makes for a hearty supper.
Smells good. Ready? Smells very good. Okay, let's get these last bits out.
Every darn little
Get it while it's hot.
bit.
Thank you very much. This is bacon and eggs, like you've never seen it before.
It's delicious. Because of the saltiness of the bacon, you don't need salt on your egg, do you?
Well, that's
The Valley team have triumphed over the mainspring tasks on the farm. No one knows for sure how the peas are going to do in Triangle Field, but after 4 months' hard labour, they can at least look forward to finding out.
So did you have a good day?
yeah, nonetheless, we had a great day.
Yeah.
Good fun.
There's a farmer up in Yorkshire who used to go fishing at this period and kept a diary about it.
Right.
Now, it becomes obvious when you read his diary that the main reason for fishing was to avoid his wife that he didn't get on with.